County Monaghan Inniskeen has been among other things an inspiration for legends, a haven for highwaymen, a home to poets, and remains largely unchanged from the turn of the century. Patrick Kavanagh was born in October 1904 in Mucker, Inniskeen. He was born to James Kavanagh and Bridget Quinn, who lived and worked on a small farm in the bogs of Monaghan. Along with the farm, his father James was a cobbler, a trade which Patrick himself had to pick up when he left school at the age of 12. Patrick was just an ordinary Irish boy living and working at home for 20 years, mainly on the farm that would someday be his. He did everything a normal boy would at this age, including being a goalkeeper for his local Gaelic team. There is a play called The Rural Times by the Nomadic Theatre Company, which is about Patrick's life along with that of his friend and foe Brenton Behan. In this play, Ken McElroy, who wrote the piece and starred as Kavanagh himself, had a great monologue about Patrick's younger years when he first started working on the farm. I came in running through the door. I can still feel the excitement now. I had my fists clenched. My boots were muddy. I ran through the fields as fast as I could carry myself. I jumped over the ditches. I'm sure there was a tear in my clothes somewhere. But the main thing was in my hand. I held it so tight. I don't even know how to describe the feeling. But anyway, I bust through the doors and ran to the kitchen to find my mum. She was standing there wearing her apron, looking down at me. I said, Mum, look, would you look? And I opened my hand. There's the 2 shilling I got for the day's work. Like, some people mightn't have said it was much, or some people would say it was nothing at all, but for that day, I worked hard that day. I was just a young boy, but I worked as hard as them men that day. You could still see the beads of sweating on the coins and the silver. I grasped them so hard and I ran as hard as I could. My mum closed over my hand and said, Patrick, that's yours. Keep it. I was so proud that day. At his age, the only thing that was different about Patrick was that he began to write, and it was writing in verse. In his later years, he would put pen to paper and say, I dabbled in verse, and it became my life. As he started to write more and more, he sent his work to local and national newspapers. It was the Dundalk Democrat that printed his first piece in 1928. A few years later, in 1931, Patrick walked to Dublin, which is a feckin' long way, but as his family would not have been well off and transport would have been expensive, this is the only way to get around. He went to Dublin to get in contact with a publishing company called Macmillan's, who ended up publishing his first book, Ploughman and Other Poems. He followed what many people then and today would say, whatever you do, at least do something about something that you know. Ploughing fields and working hard was what he knew best. From this, he decided to head for the big smoke, London. It was here where Patrick hoped to expand his wealth of work and become a great poet. This dream, however, was just him chasing the magic dragon, and he left London with nothing but rejection. The next anyone heard of him was when his autobiography came out called The Green Fool, which was taken off the shelves after a liberal threat from Oliver St. John Gardaí, who was an established poet and writer who completed his studies at Oxford. Patrick had finally found a place to settle. Where else? Dublin, the place where all great writers seemed to be at the time, and if you look at any Irish poet, they're more than likely spent their time, if not lived, in Dublin. So I'm sure Patrick thought, why not head there to seek out fame and spread his work? He was now known as the Ploughman Poet, and was accepted into the literary community, which soon disowned him when they found out he wanted to be more than just a bogman from Monaghan, but also found himself a job as a journalist. This made him more enemies thick and fast, as he printed what he thought, and what he thought wasn't necessarily what others wanted to hear. While in this job, Patrick kept writing, and it was around the time of 1942 that he published a long poem that is considered his best piece of work, called The Great Hunger. Its tragic statement of mental and sexual frustrations of rural life was recognised as masterly by Frank O'Connor and George Yates. It was maybe due to this that the poem, along with that of Terry Flynn, was initially banned by publication. At this point of his life and work, Patrick himself said that this work was not only the best, but the only authentic account of his life, as it is when living in Ireland this century. Throughout the whole life of Patrick, he kept in touch with his brother Peter, writing letters which included his work and stories, mainly asking him for money and help. It was his brother that helped him set up his own newspaper, called the Kavanagh Weekly, in 1952. However, after 13 issues, they decided to pull the plug on it. In Patrick Kavanagh, the complete poems, collected, arranged and edited by Peter Kavanagh, there is a letter Peter wrote after his death. Dear Patrick, it is now more than 4 years since I last wrote to you, and I find that the longer I delay, the less I have to say. A year or two ago I might have discussed your funeral, deciding which groups was the most offensive, those who came or those who stayed. There were a few genuine friends in attendance, of course. Information on your departure came to me from the Gardaí in Carrickmacross, which will give you some idea of the prevailing mood. Your philosophy of not caring must have saved the day for you. Just the same, I was very disappointed that I hadn't the opportunity of seeing you off, as you saw of me on many of the occasions. Much talk of you since you have gone, at least half of it bitter, and of reminding begrudgingly. Still, I suppose one should not complain. Perhaps they mean well. It is hard to say. All of your writing has been put out of print for some time. Nothing at all of yours in the Dublin bookstores. Recently, The Green Fool was reissued, but since you stated many times that this book was part of your juvenile, it is hard to know what is the motive behind the present edition. Fortunately, I continue to have my health, and so I have been hacking away on my own, publishing your papers. I began as arranged with our correspondence. Lapped Furrows, then last year, November Haggard, a selection of your uncollected prose and verse arranged by me in such a way that it was essence, an essay on your viewpoint. Now complete poems, the biggest job of all. Not a penny contributed to anyone but myself to these enterprises, and this in the world of cultural commodities, arts councils, fellowships and the rest, when in 1952 you asked if I would help you start up a newspaper. I threw everything I owned into